everyone. Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the Delphi trial transcript. We are reading through Indiana versus Richard Allen in the homicides of Libby German and Abby Williams. And we are on the state's case. We're moving right along. We are on part 10, which is going to be the second part of Brian Olehy's testimony. I believe we're in the middle of direct still. Um, we left off for the day, and then we're coming back with the date of October 22nd, 2024. So if you think about it, this trial was not that long ago, to be quite honest. I mean, it did take a while for the transcript to come out, but um, I mean, this happened the end of last year, and everything was hidden from us, and now we're getting to see what really happened in those courtrooms, in that courtroom. So let's continue on where we left off. So, like I said, this is Brian Olehy. He's a former Indiana State Police investigator, crime scene investigator. He was basically the lead of the crime scene investigators when they arrived on scene. There were only a few on scene. He was the one in charge. So let's continue on. Please hit the like button and let's get started. And as I said, this is redirect continued. They had to break in the middle of direct, or I'm sorry, not redirect, direct. It's in the middle of direct. They had to break in the middle of direct because it was the end of the day. So the court, we come back the next day, and the court says, all right, well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are back on the record in State of Indiana versus Richard Allen. I'll show the defendants here in person with counsel. The state is here by their prosecutor and deputies. The jury has reassembled. Are we ready to proceed, Mr. Luttrell? Mr. Luttrell says we are. I thought the witness on the stand yesterday was right here, and now he just stepped out. So the court says, okay. Mr. Luttrell says we'll have him here in just a second. Given the fact that I'm going to be showing him a number of evidence items, we have a smaller table and I would like to set closer to the witness. Okay, says the court. Mr. Luttrell continues, if the court would allow that. The court says, sure, yeah. It would probably be easier than walking back and forth for all of that. Mr. Luttrell says, yes. Judge, do you want the witness at the witness stand? Court says, yes, please. Maybe just in front of the stand. The witness says, yes, ma'am. She's so nice, isn't she? We all know better, but she acts professionally when she's on the record, doesn't she? At least in these circumstances here on trial when there's a lot of people watching her. The court says, that way you're not popping up and down. Is the defense ready to proceed? Mr. Rosie says, yes. The court says, okay, let's go. Bailiff says, all rise. Jury enters the room at 9:04 a.m. The bailiff says, thank you. You may be seated. The court says, thank you, gentlemen. All right. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to see you back this morning. I hope you had a pleasant evening. We are ready to continue. And, Mr. Olehy, I'll just remind you that you are still under oath, sir. The witness says, yes, Your Honor. Court says, you may proceed, Mr. Luttrell. Thank you, Your Honor. We were talking about evidence that was collected and taken to either the Lafayette Post or the Putnamville Post. Do you recall that? I do. I'm going to show you a number of items. They have many different numbers on them, but I'm going to focus as I talk to you on the state's exhibit sticker for clarification for the record and for the jury. May I ask you to note other numbers that are, but I may ask you to note other numbers that are also on there. The witness says, I understand. What is the case number? A case number is an identifying number which gives an individual incident or series of incidents an identifying number, which all reports can be referenced under that number. They may have an initial case report is assigned a number and then supplemental reports by another officer, the same officer, or by a lab personnel, may be referenced by that case number. Are you familiar with the number 17K 00066? That number would be, because it's a K, I'm sorry, that would be a lab case number. The lab will individually assign a case number to an instance so that the lab management system can track and do a very similar thing. But as a regular case number would for a trooper, but the lab assigns a specific number for each event as well. So a case number, and he reads off this long number. Are you familiar with that number? Yes, I am. And what is that number? That is the original case number drawn for the incident involving this matter of the Indiana State Police. The 17 indicates the year that it was drawn, and the ISP indicates that's a state police case number. So 17 ISP. And then with their system, the C indicates that it's a criminal matter. And then the individual or identifying digits remaining are the actual case numbers assigned to it, sequentially given. So their case number would be, whoops, 001748, but this identifies it as an ISP criminal case that took place in 2017. It's kind of a nifty little numbering system there. Was any other investigation, any other case, any other state police matter given the number 171748? No. That would be an individual case number assigned to an individual incident. Case numbers are never reused and they're actually assigned sequentially in the order which they are drawn by an officer through the entire statewide CAD system. So you're not going to duplicate a number. One number is drawn, it could be drawn in the southern part of the state and it could be drawn in the northern part of the state, but that number is drawn individually to a specific event. Well, we have a number, so basically a nationwide database that can't be recycled. Those numbers can't be reused. We have a number of well, not nationwide, but you know what I mean, like a statewide or a system-wide database that probably throughout the state of Indiana that no numbers can be duplicated. We have a number of items here. I don't believe it's necessary for me to go through every single one in detailed fashion, but I'm going to hand you the first one here, States Exhibit 137, and ask you if you could identify for the jury. This is a sealed paper bag containing a white bag which contains a black and white Nike brand shoe, which was size 10 and was recovered from the Deer Creek. So one of Libby's shoes that was one was recovered. Remember, in the creek, one was underneath Abby's body, which Brian testified to, or officer, sergeant, whatever his title was. Yeah, Sergeant Olehy. He testified to that in the first part of his direct in yesterday's episode that he found the second shoe, the second Nike shoe under Abby, and then the phone was under the shoe, almost completely covered. Which again begs the question, why was there any dew on the phone to begin with? It just doesn't. None of that makes sense to me. But anyways, let's move on. And who was it who collected? Was it who packaged by? And this is an item that was that a question? Like I added some of my own language in there because that was not. And who was it collected? Who was it packaged by? And that was his question. And then the witness cuts him off and says, "This is an item collected at the scene, and I provided it to Sergeant Cody to take to the Putnamville Post for drying, and it was packaged after drying by Sergeant Cody." Remember, Sergeant Cody of the Putnamville Post. This officer, I believe he's with the Lafayette Post or something. I don't know. But this officer, Officer Olehy, didn't have the facilities for drying the clothing, so he gave it to Sergeant Cody to dry at their Putnamville post. So, just in case you forgot that tidbit of information or just needed to be reminded. All right, so does the other sticker on it indicate that it was then transported from Putnamville Post to the Indiana State Police Laboratory in Indianapolis? It The sticker itself doesn't indicate the transfer, but it indicates that the item has been entered into the lab management system or the lab's reporting system. The sticker itself doesn't do the tracking. There's a barcode on the sticker where is a scanner used within the lab to track each individual item. The barcode is unique and individual to this item, and no two barcodes are alike. For efficiency, with the court's permission, I'm going to ask you to come down and I'm going to show you the other items. Mr. Luttrell says, "Is that okay, Your Honor?" The court says, "You may. Yeah, as long as you just keep your voice up for us." The witness says, "Yes, ma'am." "If you would just," says Mr. Luttrell, "Yep, maybe stand right here so the jury can see you. I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit 138. The witness says, "This is a sealed paper bag containing a white bag which contains a pair of Hollister brand blue jeans, size waist 26, length 33, recovered from Deer Creek. This was packaged also by Sergeant Cody after drying at Putnamville Post." Exhibit 139. So these are the actual exhibits, right? So we've seen pictures of things, but now they're going through actual physical items of evidence that I don't know if he's unwrapping them. It doesn't seem that they're not asking him to open them. He's going through each of them and saying what's inside without opening it. I don't know. This is how they're doing it. So, those were some jeans. Exhibit 139. This is also an item from Deer Creek. It's a sealed paper bag containing a white bag which contains a color tone brand tie-dyed t-shirt, size extra large, recovered from Deer Creek, also given to Sergeant Cody by me, and transported to Putnamville Post for drying. Exhibit 140, again from Deer Creek, given to Sergeant Cody, a sealed paper bag containing a white bag which contains a gray, no boundaries brand hooded sweatshirt, size medium, which was recovered from Deer Creek and taken to Putnamville Post for drying. I believe this was Abby's gray sweatshirt that she was wearing. She's pictured in it walking on the Monon High Bridge in the and in the Bridge Guy video. She's wearing it. States Exhibit 141. Also an item recovered from Deer Creek. It is a sealed paper bag containing a pair of Sonoma brand pink underwear recovered from Deer Creek, also taken to Putnamville Post for drying and packaged by Sergeant Cody. Exhibit 142. This is from Deer Creek, a sealed paper bag containing a white bag, which contains a black and purple sock, recovered from Deer Creek and taken to Putnamville, packaged by Sergeant Cody. In 143, also recovered from Deer Creek, an item taken to the Putnamville Post for drying by Sergeant Cody, a sealed paper bag containing a white bag which contains a pink sock. So we had a purple and black sock and now a pink sock. No, I don't know who either of them belong to. It could be one person and they were wearing mismatched socks. I don't know. 144. Another item from Deer Creek taken to Putnamville Post for drying, packaged by Sergeant Cody, and a sealed paper bag containing a white bag which contains a green headscarf, so like a green bandana, recovered from Deer Creek. And 145. This green headscarf or bandana was never identified as the victim's, and we don't know who it belonged to or if there was any DNA that was recoverable from it because they didn't test. So, just an FYI. And 145. Another item from Deer Creek taken to Putnamville Post for drying and packaged by Sergeant Cody. A sealed paper bag containing a white bag which contains a black Faded Glory brand spaghetti strapped shirt, size large, recovered from Deer Creek. So I wonder if that was like a undershirt tank top that one of the girls was wearing. By the size, I would maybe presume that it was Abby's, but or Libby's, but it could have been Abby's. Also, we don't know, if it was like a child size large or it doesn't say. So, not sure. Your Honor, the state would move the admission of States Exhibits 137 through 145. Mr. Rosie says no objection. So, all those exhibits that they just went through are admitted. Mr. Luttrell says, may I take a moment to? The court says yes. You yourself testified that you collected items and took them that night, sometime after 10:30 p.m., to the Lafayette Post from Ground Zero, the crime scene. Is that correct? That's correct. I took items from the area directly to the Lafayette Post for storage. You didn't go anywhere else between Ground Zero and... No. I went from the area of where my vehicle was parked in the cemetery, took the items from the investigated area and the crime scene to my vehicle, and drove my vehicle directly to the Lafayette district. Handing you Exhibit 146. This is an item packaged by myself, which was recovered at the crime scene. It's a paper bag, sealed paper bag, containing a Converse tennis shoe recovered. It's the right shoe recovered at the scene. So this would be Abby's Converse tennis shoe. 147. This is another item recovered from the scene. This is also a Converse shoe recovered from the body of Abby Williams, the left Converse shoe. It bears my markings and my initials, showing that I'm the one that packaged and placed it into evidence. By the way, you mentioned the barcode to the jury on one of the items that Sergeant Cody transported. Do each of these items I'm handing you have a barcode on them? Yes, they do. And that is a tracking system within the Indiana State Police System Laboratory System. It is. It is a tracking system to identify each individual item. Once the item is entered into the lab system, it is given a unique item number for the lab to track and a unique and universal barcode. States Exhibit 148. And this is a sealed paper bag that I packaged that includes a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson cartridge removed from the scene and located near the bodies in between the two bodies at the crime scene. So that would be the cartridge that they think cycled through Richard Allen's gun, even though that is ridiculous logic. And the girls weren't shot. So also not logical. You mean that you obtained several swabs from either the physical area in Ground Zero or on bodies themselves, is that correct? Correct. I'm going to hand you Exhibit 149. This is a collection of a strand of material taken from between the fingers of the right hand of Abby, collected at the crime scene, and it bears my signature or my initials on the seals. So a strand of material taken from between the fingers of the right hand of Abby. This is the piece of suspected hair that was never tested until trial started, or at least jury voir dire started, jury selection. And then the state was like, oh, we might want to test that, maybe. Exhibit 150. This is also a collected strand of material from the left arm of Abby. A collected strand of material. It's sealed in an envelope and bears my signature or my initials on the seals for that item. Exhibit 151. This is a swab on the inside of Libby's left wrist. This was collected at the scene by me. It bears my initials on the seals. It was taken from the scene directly to storage at the Indiana State Police post in Lafayette. 152. This is again an item taken from the scene. It is a swab, a cotton swab of the inside of Libby's right wrist taken at the scene and taken to the district for storage and temporary storage immediately after. And we got our first inaudible. There you go. 20 minutes in. 153, sir. This is an item which I packaged and it bears my initials on the seals. It's a swab taken from the above belly button of Libby at the scene and taken to the storage and safekeeping in the temporary storage at the Lafayette Post. 154. This is an item collected at the scene by myself and packaged bearing my initials. It's a swab of the thigh above the knee of Libby taken and transported from the scene directly to the Lafayette Post. States Exhibit 155. This is an item collected at the scene on the 14th by myself and packaged by me bearing my initials on the seals. It is a strand of fibrous material taken from the pinky finger of the left hand of Libby. It was taken from the scene directly to the Lafayette Post for storage. States Exhibit 156, sir. This is a swab standard of a blood stain on a tree, which was located near the body. So this would be the rune or the F tree. The swab was taken approximately 4 feet above ground level from the tree, and this was a swab taken by me and packaged by me. It bears my signature. I collected this at the scene on the 14th and took it also, as with other items, directly to the Lafayette Post for storage and security and withholding within the state police laboratory system. 157. This is item 157 taken from the scene of the 14th, on the 14th, collected by me and packaged by me, bearing my signature and identifying numbers on the seals. This bag contains a black Nike tennis shoe collected at the scene under the body of Abby Williams. So this is the second Nike tennis shoe under the body of Abby. That item was also collected on the 14th and transported the same day directly to the Lafayette Post. All these items that we've recovered, you personally handled that I'm gonna what? You personally handled that I'm gonna showing you today. This clerk, whoever wrote these transcripts up, did a really piss poor job. Sorry, just saying. There's a lot of errors. All these items which we've covered, you personally handled that I'm gonna be showing you today. I'm assuming he says that's correct. 158. This is an item 158. The number assigned to this item. Why does he keep repeating the number and telling us that's what's assigned? This is a swab from an area of blood found in between two markers placed on the ground between markers 3 and 4, which we placed on the ground to indicate different areas of blood or proposed or potential blood. This is a swab taken from the ground and collected by me, sealed and packaged by me, bearing my signature and identifying number and transporting to the Lafayette Post immediately on that day. 159. This is a swab from the ground near the feet of Libby, collected by me and packaged by me and bearing my number and initials, all that good stuff. He just keeps repeating the same shit. Sorry for the language. It is a swab on the ground of a red-colored material, presumed to be blood, collected at the scene, taken on that day on the 14th and transported on the 14th to the Lafayette Post. Exhibit 160. This is a swab from the ground directly below the head of Libby, a swab of the area collected by me and packaged by me, bearing my initials on the seals and my identifying number collected on the 14th, taken to the Lafayette Post on the same day following my examination at the scene and stored in evidence at the Indiana State Police Post. Exhibit 161. This is a swab from the ground near the tree which had the blood on it the previously collected. The swab was from the ground near that tree and it was collected by me, presumed blood. The swab was collected on that date, on the 14th, and bears my initials on the seals and was transported to the Lafayette Post. 162. This is also a swab of presumed blood from the ground between the tree and the body of Abby, collected on the 14th by me. The item bears my identifying number and my initials. It was from the ground between the tree and the body and was collected on the 14th and taken directly to the Lafayette Post for storage following collection at the end of the processing. 163. This is a swab of red stain below the head of Abby Williams from the ground directly below her head, collected by me, packaged by me, bearing my initials and number, collected as evidence, sealed, packaged, taken to the Lafayette Post. 164. This is also a swab taken from a tree with red stains on the top of the north side of the tree. The swab was collected by and packaged by me, bearing my initials, number, collected on the 14th, transported to the Lafayette Post for storage, and entered into the lab system. 165. This is a swab sample from the red stain on a tree on the lower stain of the north side of the tree. The swab was collected by me and packaged by me, my initials, my number. It was collected on the 14th, transported to Lafayette, storage, security, entry into the lab. 166. This is a swab collected by me from the finger of the left index finger of Libby. This is a swab that I collected and sealed. It bears my initial and my number, transported from the scene directly to the post on the 14th at the conclusion of my investigation at the scene on that date and stored at the Lafayette Post and entered into the lab system. My God, he just keeps repeating all the same steps. States Exhibit 167. Again, a swab collected on the 14th by myself. This item bears my initials and my identifying number on the seals. It is a swab from the left pinky finger of Libby. This item is packaged and transported, all that same stuff. Exhibit 168. This is a cellular telephone, an iPhone, collected from the scene. The item was collected at the scene and taken by me from the Lafayette, from the scene directly to the Lafayette Post and placed into temporary storage. The item was directly taken to that storage on that date on the 14th. I'm going to show you States Exhibit 169. This is an item collected by Sergeant Gilbert, First Sergeant Gilbert, my supervisor. This contains swab standards, collected from the cellular telephone, which I just handled prior to any processing or recovery of evidence by any technician to determine information or data on the phone. The phone was swabbed by First Sergeant Gilbert prior to that handling, and these are swabs of that phone and case. On the morning of February 15th, where were you? I was en route and then also in Terre Haute to attend the autopsies of Abby and Libby. And was this phone in temporary storage with the other items? That phone was secured in temporary storage during my travels to Terre Haute. And was this then on the 15th swabbed by First Sergeant Gilbert? First Sergeant Gilbert, is that correct? That's correct. There was interesting and interest in getting the phone examined. My God, the errors in this is outstanding. There was interest in getting the phone examined on the 15th while you were at the autopsy. That's correct. So the other items were put in completely packaged on another date. All of the items went into temporary storage on the 14th. The items were placed in temporary secure storage at the Lafayette Post. As I mentioned yesterday, There's a limited number of people who have access to the temporary storage location, and only a limited number of people have access or keys to those storage areas. First Sergeant Gilbert, my supervisor, had that access, as well as the evidence clerk at the Lafayette Post would have access to it. First Sergeant Gilbert, to my knowledge, recovered the phone from the temporary storage and swapped it prior to any handling by any technician to determine what data was or was not on the phone. What did you do on the 16th, the day after the autopsy, back at the Lafayette Post? My primary duty on that date was completing any sealing, packaging, or labeling of the items, and then completing what's called a property record and receipt, which clearly identifies each individual item, assigns it an individual item number that I assign, and then providing them to the evidence clerk for entry into the lab evidence management system, whereby she would then assign them an individual and unique number in the lab evidence management system, print out an evidence individual barcode for each item, and place it on each item individually specific to that item. From ground zero, each item, when collected, were placed in individual packaging? They were. No items were packaged together or stored together or placed into any receptacle or container together. Each item was individually packaged and taken in that form to temporary storage that night? That's correct. You went to the autopsy on the 15th. That's correct. And then on the 16th, you began packaging these items, further sealing them and denoting the stickers and so forth you've described on the 16th. That's correct. And they're already in individual packages? That's correct. And did you do that packaging or that systemized putting on the stickers on one at a time? Yes. Or did you get them all out on the table like I have them today at once? No, the stickers are applied one at a time individually to each item. I would move the admission, Your Honor, of States Exhibit 146 to 169. And 169, you say, Jim? Says Mr. Rosie. Mr. Luttrell says yes. Mr. Rosie has no objection. The state admits them. I mean, the court, it says they're admitted. At the autopsy, you stated that you collected certain items, as well as your colleague Brandon Mullen collected certain items at the autopsy. Is that correct? That's correct. I'm going to show you States Exhibit 170. This is a swab collected by me at the autopsy of Liberty German. It is a swab from the left thigh collected at autopsy by me and sealed and initialed on the seals with my identifying initials and number, and collected by me and then taken from the autopsy in Terre Haute to the Lafayette Post for storage. So swab of her thigh that they took. They took swabs of her thigh at the crime scene, and now they're taking more swabs of her thigh at the autopsy. Exhibit 171, sir. This is an item packaged as evidence by me. It's a swab from the right thigh, collected at autopsy of Libby. It is sealed by me, initialed, my identifying numbers, taken from the autopsy of the 15th in Terre Haute, transported for storage to Lafayette, secured at the Lafayette district. 172. This is an item from this matter collected by me. It is a swab from the right breast area of Libby collected at the autopsy. It was collected by me, packaged by me, and bears my seals, identifying number, initial, collected at the autopsy on the 15th in Terre Haute, transported to Lafayette, storage, security, and entry into the lab system. 173. This is a swab collected by me at autopsy on the 15th in Terre Haute from the left breast of Libby, collected at autopsy and sealed and packaged individually by me with my initials and my identifying number, taken from the autopsy in Terre Haute at the 15th to the Lafayette Post on that same date for storage and entry in the lab evidence management system. We have two boxes here, 174 and 175. Would you tell the jury what 174 is? This is a state of Indiana's sexual assault evidence collection kit. These are pre-prepared collection kits, so like an R kit. You've heard the term R rhymes with grape um, kit. Sealed, so they did essay kits on them, basically, or R kits, whatever you want to call them. They're the same thing. These are pre-prepared collection kits sealed prior to use and only opened upon their use, generally either at an examination of an individual or at an autopsy of an individual. They contain various items and swabs to include a comb and some envelopes. This is the standard size. This is a standard box of an assay kit used in throughout the state of Indiana in hospitals and morgues for the collection of evidence from victims. It's a victim assault. It's a victim of SA kit. This one individually was collected. It was provided to the forensic pathologist, Dr. Roland Core. It was provided to Dr. Core, and he completed the collection of the actual items sealed within this. Each item is individually packaged inside, and then all of the items are collected, the other ones individually packaged. This is a very standard collection kit collected. This one was collected at Terre Haute Regional Hospital on the 15th. This is the essay kit collected from Abby Williams. It was provided back to me from Dr. Core and his staff. I sealed it again and it bears my initials. Actually, it bears Brandon's initials. This was taken by Brandon for drying prior to entry into the lab management system. For drying an essay kit? That makes no sense to me. Why would that other sergeant have to take it to air drying facility if it's an SA kit? Confused by that. All right, let's move on. And 175. Can we go back to that item? 174? Yeah, so that it was sealed by me. It has both seals, sealed by Brandon Mullen. These red evidence seals are actually inside and contained within the initial kit. He actually closed the box and provided me with his seals on it when he handed it to me. Are you seeing your initials? In the autopsy, there are Brandon's initials. And then I resealed it again additionally after I took it from him and sealed it with my initials. So they didn't take it to drying, I guess, is what that was a correction of what he was talking about. Okay. Makes more sense then. And this is for Abby Williams. Is that right? I took it to the Lafayette Post. That's for Abby. Yes. And it bears the sticker, bears the reference Lafayette Post. Yes. So Sergeant Mullen did take several items to Putnamville for drying, but not State's Exhibit 174. Not the essay. No, 174. No, I took it. And Exhibit 175. Again, a standard evidence kit, essay evidence collection kit. Same as this, it's identical in every manner. And for which person does that apply to? This was collected from the deceased, from Libby, collected by Dr. Core and his staff. It was closed, and the attached seals were affixed by Sergeant Mullen, and then I continued my sealing process with my initials and my identifying number. It was collected on the 15th of February 2017 at Terre Haute Regional Hospital, transported by me to the Lafayette District for storage and security in the lab management system. Exhibit 176. This is a trace fiber collected by me at the autopsy of Abby Williams from the upper left arm at autopsy. The item itself, or the item inside actually contains a paper bindle or a piece of paper folded up along the actual fiber material to keep it in, so you can easily find it when you're when you open the package and keep it protected within the package so it doesn't get lost inside the package. What is he talking about? Oh, the package for the fiber that they collected. It was collected by me, sealed and initialed with the identifying number and my initials. It was collected at the autopsy, transport to Lafayette for entry into storage at the Lafayette Post, and then entry into the lab system. All right. The items that you indicated Sergeant Mullen collected at the autopsy, I do believe you testified yesterday that was for the drying purposes. That's correct. And the Putnamville district was better at drying, and the Putnamville district was a better drying room. What kind of language is that? I don't know if that's the Mr. Luttrell said that question or if um that was the clerk, but the correct way to say that, and the Putnamville district had a better drying room, or not was a better drying room. Just, yeah, people, writing is, English comprehension and writing skills are necessary in life. Just saying. All right, so their facility was much improved for drying of the items. I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit 177. This is an item collected at the autopsy. It is a sealed paper bag containing a black hooded sweatshirt. It's a Gildan brand, size 2XL with Delphi Swimming printed on the front and the word German printed on the back. It bears red stains, and the item also contains a paper bag. The sweatshirt was transported in. So the sweatshirt was transported in a paper bag. So it has the paper bag and a sealed bag around that. It's sealed by Sergeant Mullen and it's been entered into the lab evidence management system using the same lab number as the other items, individually numbered for that item, its own individual barcode. 178. This is an item collected at autopsy in Terre Haute, collected by Sergeant Mullen, a sealed paper bag containing a pair of blue jeans, Maurice's brand, size extra large, with red stains and dirt on them. The pair also contained a paper bag. The jeans were transported in from autopsy. It was sealed and initialed by Sergeant Mullen and bears the lab evidence number as well as the barcode assigned to the individual item for this item collected at the autopsy in Terre Haute on the 15th. God, he has really long-winded answers. So 177 was the sweatshirt, and 178 the jeans that the jury saw in the photograph that were worn by Abby. That's correct. So those jeans that he just described were on Abby at the time of finding the bodies. 180. This is an item collected at the autopsy in Terre Haute in my presence by Sergeant Mullen. It's a sealed paper bag containing a gray cotton bra, Fruit of the Loom brand size 34 with red stains on it. It also contained a paper bag that the bra was transported in from autopsy. It's sealed and signed by Sergeant Mullen as an item collected in this manner with its own individual barcode assigned by the lab management system. I think I got out of sequence. 179. This is State's Exhibit 179 is an item collected at the autopsy in my presence by Sergeant Mullen taken to the Putnamville Post for drying. It is a sealed paper bag containing a pink sleeveless shirt, unknown brand and size, with red stains. The item, Abby was wearing a pink sleeveless top, if you recall, on the bridge. That and the gray sweatshirt. So that would be likely Abby's shirt. The item also contains a paper bag that the shirt was transported in. It bears the signature seal initialed by Sergeant Mullen and also bears barcode, individual lab number, and it went into the lab evidence management system. Does he really need to tell us for every single one? I'm just going to ignore that. piece of it from now on. I'm really sick of just repeating the same stuff. And finally, 181. This is an item collected at autopsy in Terre Haute on the 15th of February, collected in my presence by Sergeant Mullen. It bears the item is a sealed paper bag containing a black bra, unknown size, 34A, with the red stains. And the item also contains a paper bag the bra was transported in from the autopsy on that date. It is sealed and signed by Mullen and all the other good stuff. So these were the other garments, the pink top, the gray bra, and the black bra. That's correct. From the body of Abby. That's correct. Was 169 admitted, Your Honor? Was that part of the group? The court says yes. So I would move the admission of 170, Your Honor, to 181. Mr. Rosie says no objection. They are so admitted. Mr. Luttrell says, Your Honor, at this time, I would ask leave, given the fact that there have been a lot of descriptions by the witness of various markings and stickers. I would ask leave to pass to the jury in their sealed condition 146, 147, and 148 as a sample without passing all of them to the jury so that they can see for themselves. Court says, okay. So 146, 147, and 148? Correct, Your Honor. Okay, you may. The court says, Officer, you can go ahead and have a seat. The witness says, Yes, ma'am. Court says, I'm sorry you were standing there. The jury's done, Mr. Luttrell. Mr. Luttrell says, Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to show you a photograph you identified yesterday that was conditionally admitted into evidence subject to Dr. Korr's testimony. By the way, when we say Korr, that's Kohr. Is that correct? That's correct. Just to keep it clear. Exhibit 123, without showing it to the jury, would you examine that? What is that a photo of? That is a photograph taken of the autopsy of Abby. Some of the clothing items found on her have already been removed. This is a layered photo showing an item of evidence we just handled. She's wearing what I would call a pink sleeveless shirt underneath. It was underneath a black sweatshirt. So remember, she was wearing the Delphi swim shirt, which was supposedly Kelsey's, and originally her sweatshirt was the gray sweatshirt, so it's odd that she was redressed in that. And did you notice at the time and in the photograph, did you notice any lines of discoloration on that top? Yeah, there are red staining areas of presumed blood, as well as some areas of lines. I'm talking about the lower part of the shirt. Some lines on it indicating moisture and wetness to the item. And did you notice that the sweatshirt itself was damp? I believe you testified. It was at ground zero. It was found damp in the condition they were found at the scene, and it was still damp the following day at autopsy. And then the pink top that was underneath it. You were able to see it better at the autopsy, correct? Yes, correct. Does that photograph show the moisture still on the white on the top? I believe the photograph clearly depicts the moisture area on the lower portion of the top. In fact, why did you have Sergeant Mullen take those items from the autopsies to Putnamville instead of you taking them to Lafayette? Really, we need to answer this again? Because of the drying room capabilities of the Putnamville Post and the drying room capabilities, or lack thereof, of the Lafayette district. Those items are still wet, or were still wet. They'll still have been wet from what was presumed to be moisture from water and or moisture from biologics, to include presumably blood, in order to dry them correctly and properly and preserve any potential evidence, keep them from decaying or degrading. Are you familiar with a cartridge? I think You may have answered, another witness may have answered, what do we call the end of the cartridge that's not the bullet end, the case? The primer end of the cartridge would be called the head stamp area. It also contains the primer in a semi-automatic cartridge. And did the cartridge that you collected, was it a Winchester Smith& and Wesson 40 caliber? Yes, it was. That's the brand and then the caliber. Thank you. I have no further questions. Mr. Rosie, says the court. Mr. Rosie says thank you, and we will begin cross-examination of Detective Brian Olehy with Brian Rosie doing the questioning for Richard Allen. All right, so Mr. Rosie says one of the most common rounds of ammunition you'll find anywhere, isn't it, Smith& and Wesson? I would say so. Okay, all right. You went through a lot of exhibits today. I think I counted about 48 of them, and let me hand you what's been marked. May I approach, Judge? You may. I'll hand you what's been marked 151, states 151, just so we can kind of make sure that we're coordinated there in terms of exhibits. Is that the exhibit that is reflected as a swab of the inside of Libby's left wrist? Is that right? That's correct. It's a swab. And one of the areas why you would take a swab like that is because there may be an opportunity to take that sample from that swab and use it for DNA purposes, right? It could be used for that, yes. It's one of the primary reasons, really, why you retain these kind of things, right? Collect and retain them. Collect and retain, yes. Okay, and was there any information that was generated from that swab that connects Mr. Allen with the crime scene? I'm not aware of any. Okay. Do you think you probably would be considering the scope of this investigation if that were the case? I'm sorry, considering the scope? Yeah, considering the attention that this investigation has gotten, do you think that you'd probably be aware of that as you sit here today if that were true? I would assume I would if there was some kind of connection to Alan, but so far we don't have any, still to this day. Okay, 152, a swab of the inside right wrist of Libby. Any information generated from that swab that connects Mr. Allen with this crime scene? Not that I'm aware of. 153, swab above the belly of Libby. Any information from that swab that connects this man to that crime? Not to my knowledge. 154, a swab of an area above her knee. Any information from that swab that connects him with the crime scene? I'm not aware of if it connected anyone. 155, strike that. That was a strand of fibrous material. 156, a swab of blood stain from one of the trees out there. Any information from that swab that connects Mr. Allen with that crime scene? Not that I'm aware of. 158, another swab between two markers on the ground. Any information from that swab that connects Mr. Allen to this crime scene? Not that I'm aware of. 159, a swab from what looks like the ground near Libby's foot. Any information from that swab that connects Mr. Allen to the crime scene? Mr. Luttrell says, to which I would object, Your Honor. I've not objected till now, but this is not the witness, as he's already stated previously that did any analysis or was directly involved in that. This witness will testify, and so it's inappropriate for this officer or this witness to testify and answer that question. I object. The court says, any response? Mr. Rosie says, Judge, he said I'm asking him if he is aware of any information that came from any of this. He testified that this is a case that's gotten a lot of attention and he would likely know at this point. I think he's entitled to ask. Mr. Luttrell says, so now my objection's relevance. It isn't relevant whether he's aware of it or not. The question can be posed to the analyst that actually did the examination. Court says, well, I would overrule the first objection, but I would sustain it on relevance. Of course you would. Of course you would. Mr. Rosie says, Judge, may I? I believe that his knowledge that Mr. Allen may be connected to this crime scene has a tendency to prove or disprove that he is involved in this crime, so it is relevant for that reason. I sustain the objection, Mr. Rosie, he says. Thank you. All right. In the course of your investigation with regard to collecting all of these items, whatever they are, swabs, clothes, whatever it is, did you ever speak with anyone that was involved in the analysis of those items in terms of what those results were? I don't have any specific recollection of a direct conversation with any of the analysts about the results of the items, directly having any conversation about it. No. Okay. And that includes the analysis of that bullet that's sitting there. Item 148. I've never had any conversations with any analyst about the cartridge. Okay. Do you have any information that you've gathered in the course of the investigation about the results of the analysis of any of this, whether you've gotten it from another investigating officer or objection, some other law enforcement authority? Mr. Luttrell says, I fail to see the relevance in this question. Mr. Rosie says, I'm asking him what the results are of the information he gathered at the scene. I think it's highly relevant. Court says, perhaps for another witness, sustained. Unreal. Have you heard of the concept of crime scene integrity, Mr. Olehy? Yes, sir. Okay. And we talked earlier about this, but would you agree with me that that generally involves the idea that you would maintain some confidentiality, at least in part, with the crime scene? I think the integrity of the crime scene and the integrity of the investigation are separate and distinct, but also of both of the same importance. Okay. So let's talk about these two prongs. One of them is that you want to maintain the integrity of that scene. You don't want that information flowing out into the public. Is that right? Trying to maintain some privacy with that? I would say yes. And that could be pretty crucial to your investigation because once that information gets out to the public, then it can be manipulated in many ways, right? That's possible. Okay. And then the other aspect of this is just kind of the hard science of making sure that there's nothing that's tampered with at crime scenes or there's nothing that is disturbed before you get a chance to analyze it. Is that correct? I would say yes. Those are kinds of the two primary parts of maintaining integrity, right? I would say they are part of the integrity. Are you aware of any information? Mr. Luttrell says, Objection, Your Honor. He, the witness, was answering the question and was interrupted by the attorney. Mr. Rosie said, He said yes. He was talking when, says Mr. Luttrell, the court says he was still talking. Finish talking. I'll complete it there. So all that, and he's like, I didn't have anything else to say. You were done talking, right? I was not, but that's fine. Okay, well, then finish what you were going to say. I don't remember what I was going to say. All right. Are you aware of any information in this case that suggested that there was a breach of the integrity of the crime scene? Objection. It's irrelevant. How is that irrelevant? Overruled. I'm not aware of any. Did anybody suggest to you at any point, hey, there were some photos that were taken of the crime scene by the individuals from the public? I'm not aware of that. Okay. And what about any of the search party members that may have taken photos of the crime scene? I have no knowledge. Is that something you think you would have knowledge of in a normal investigation? I don't know. All right. Now, in terms of that, the crime scene in general, would you agree with me that when you got to the scene and first observed the scene, that there were some unique characteristics associated with that scene? To which I would object, Mr. Luttrell says, to which I would object to the form of the question, Your Honor. The "would you agree with me" suggests he's offering in his own opinion to the jury, so I'd object to the form. Mr. Rosie says, I'll rephrase it. And then, of course, she says sustained, because even though he's like, I'll withdraw the question, she's like, sustained, because she just can't wait to sustain him. These people, or this judge, well, the prosecution's ridiculous too. Prosecution and the judge are ridiculous. Mr. Rosie goes on, were there some unique circumstances associated with that scene when you got there? I would say every scene presents its own unique circumstances. Okay, well, what about this one? As with all scenes, this one presented unique characteristics. One girl was naked, right? This scene, yes. And another one was dressed, right? That's correct. And those girls were laying on the ground and there were sticks lying on their bodies, were there not? There were. And did it seem apparent to you that those sticks were not there coincidentally, that they were something that was intentionally placed there? They appear to be placed there by an individual. And did you place any significance in that aspect of the scene? That it appeared to be an attempt at concealment? That was what I assumed. Okay, that was your assumption? That was a presumption that it was meant to conceal the bodies. At any point in time, did you ever make the assumption that maybe there was some attempt to communicate some meaning by those sticks? No. Even as you sit here today, that thought's never crossed your mind. I don't see any significance in the position of the sticks. They appear to me to be positioned to conceal, in some way, the fruits of the crime. Well, there's very little parts of those bodies that were concealed, right? We can see them in the photos, right? Yeah, I mean, there were not they were not completely covered. So then how are they concealing the bodies? That makes no sense. And did you find one of those sticks to have an artificial or, I guess, a man-made cut on it? There may have been items. No, I didn't find anything that had a man-made cut to it as I would define a cut. The large branch, I believe it was the very large branch it was almost like a limb, a tree limb that was covering Libby had had been sawed off or, cut off with tools. It was not like it just fell in the woods and somebody put it on her. Did you end up collecting those sticks on that day, the 14th? I did not. Okay. You waited to collect those sticks until a few days later. Is that right? They were collected later. That was that outs and was that outside of the normal course of investigation that you would collect sticks days later? It was. So it was not typical. Somebody suggested to you to go back and collect those sticks, right? They did. And in fact, there was a couple of occasions when you went back and collected some sticks. Is that right? I did not. No. Do you remember a conversation with an officer suggesting that happen? No. You acknowledge, well, strike that. Are you aware of the original source of any of the clothing that was found on Abby Williams at that scene? In other words, whose clothing that was determined to be at any point? I don't know what a determination officially was. The items appeared to be one of the items had the name German on it, identifying it. I made the assumption that it belonged to Libby German or a member of Libby's family due to the name being on the back of it. And then the sizing of the clothing was more consistent with the size of Libby than it was with Abby. Some of the clothing appeared too large for Abby, the jeans and the sweatshirt appeared so a lot of these to be other items. I'm sorry, go ahead. You may finish. I didn't mean to interrupt you. They just appear to be other items not normally worn by Abby. Okay. So the logical assumption to be drawn there is that Libby was disrobed at some point and then those clothes ended up on Abby. Is that right? That would be a logical assumption. Were you able to make any assumptions about the chronology of that happening? That would lead to a large amount of speculation of items that I don't have at hand. Were you able to make any assumption about the location where that occurred? I was not. Whether it was on the south side of the creek, on the north side of the creek, or anywhere else? I'm not able to determine where and when those events occurred based on the evidence at the crime scene. Were you able to determine where any of those sticks came from at the scene? There were one of the largest pieces, there was an indentation that it appeared that the stick had been moved from nearby the body, but that's just an assumption, and I'm in no position as an expert to determine the movement of items. Well, did you ever do any testing with regard to those sticks to determine what type of tree they came from or what their source was? No. There were shoe impressions found in various areas around ground zero and even on the other side of the creek. Is that right? I believe there were some found, yes. Okay. And some of those were along the banks of Deer Creek. I believe so. Yes. And is it fair to say that there were signs that there had been foot traffic between or foot traffic in that area prior to your arrival in that day? Yes. I was aware of a large search the day of prior to my arrival by multiple searchers and a search by family and friends the previous night in the general area. Thank you. One of the things that can compromise the integrity of a crime scene, right? People have been walking around it. That's correct. And was there any determination by you to discern where any of those impressions came from? Not by me. You have a bunch of foot impressions in the nearby surrounding area. Nobody thought to do any kind of testing or preservation of the evidence. Nothing. Interesting, huh? And was there any blah, blah, blah. Start over. Was there ever any determination by you to discern where any of those impressions came from? Not by me. We heard some testimony earlier that, hey, it was maybe, I think it was Mr. Datzman testified that, there was one shoe impression that was found that maybe had some similarities to one of the shoes that was recovered. Are you familiar with that at all? I'm not. He's the lead CSI dude. The lead dude. And he does not know that there were impressions nearby that could have been Libby's or Abby's. They didn't say which. Just a shoe impression found by that was from one of the victims. They could have determined if there were other shoe impressions nearby, perhaps. I mean, and or evidence around there. They didn't look. This guy didn't even know about it. Okay. And so, in terms of any of those impressions, did you ever find any impressions from somebody who was wearing a smaller sized shoe? Maybe, something the size of the girls? Not that I'm aware. Okay. Was there any effort really to do anything with those shoe impressions to try and learn more from those impressions? I'm not aware of a specific effort to try to identify specifically to the shoes. The shoes had distinct and different characteristics to their soles. I'm not privy to the specifics of any of the impressions taken. I know photographs were taken of shoe impressions, but that's the extent of my knowledge. Okay, so you don't really draw any conclusions about those shoe impressions other than the fact that they exist, right? I know that there were impressions found near the area. So, yes. Okay, fingerprints. Any attempt to lift any prints out there on the scene? No. There were no good, what I could call good substrates or locations to lift prints, to include the bodies, or doing any extra disturbance of the bodies at the scene, and the porous nature of the dirty nature of the sticks themselves. Clothing items are also not good for collecting fingerprints. Those are not good substrates to produce prints. Okay. Anything up on the high bridge, a tree, a limb, anything like that that was in the area on the south side of the high bridge that would have been valuable? Not that I'm aware of. I know there's a barrier up there we've seen in one of the photos on the south side of the high bridge that cuts across the bridge. Have you seen that barrier? I recall a barrier type, like a guardrail type of a barrier. Any attempt to collect anything up there? Not in that area that I'm aware of. Okay, not by me. Well, you know that the girls were up there. You know that the girls were, the crime scene shouldn't have just involved, and the point that he's making is that the crime scene shouldn't have just involved the vicinity, the right where the girls were located. We know that they were dropped off at the Mears entrance, so anything from there to where the bodies were could be potential crime scene. And they didn't do, they didn't go wide and then go smaller. They just went straight to like the very near surrounding area and didn't do a full investigation of the surrounding area where the girls could have and where their route would have been, walk the route that they potentially took. What did they do? Is there any evidence? Things like that. And I know that some people did walk the route, some people walked the bridge, whatever, but um, one person doing it and making it a crime scene and cordoning it off and really doing a thorough investigation are very different. Anyways, let's move on. I recall a barrier thing, a guardrail. And did you do any testing up there? No, not by me. Sure. The F tree. You know what I'm talking about? I have some recollection of a tree with blood on it. Okay, and you're familiar that there's a fairly sizable amount of blood on that tree, right? There is an area of red staining on the tree, which I presume to be blood. You? I presume to be blood. Sure, okay, and the tree's garnered some attention, right? I mean, I think the entire matter has garnered much attention. Okay, all right. Well, we can agree on that. So, do you agree with me that one of the unique aspects of the markings on that tree was that there was a line, a vertical line, and it appears to be pretty straight? I never look at any sort of a compass or ruler or try to make the direction of it or find the due north or the radius of it or the direction like from a compass angle or the straightness. It appears to be to go up and down the tree trunk. What kind of a garbage response is that? All he asked you was, it appears to be pretty straight, right? Like he's trying to get to the point where it's not a natural splatter or something. It looks like somebody may have brushed it on there. But his reaction to is it straight is I don't have a compass or a ruler. And then he goes on a word salad and talks about radius and angle and straightness. And then he's just like, yeah, it appears to go up and down. He did not want to admit that, but he eventually did. Did you ever just look at it with your own two eyes and say, that's a pretty straight line? Well, I looked at it. It appears to be a large area of contact transfer of blood. Okay. Well, early in this investigation, when you were out there on the 14th, 15th, and the days and weeks after that, did you ever take the time to have somebody look at it, examine that markings closely or more closely? On the tree itself later on? No, not that I did not personally know. Did you make any attempt to try and preserve that part of the tree? Maybe take a chainsaw and cut that part out and preserve it? Anything like that? It was documented and preserved with photographic photography. Really? People take like mattresses, furniture that people, victims are found dead on, and they take a whole gosh darn couch or whatever to make sure that they preserve the evidence. They couldn't even take a chainsaw to a tree and take that portion of the tree so that they could preserve it. Couldn't do it. They just took a picture. That's it. So you didn't preserve the item itself like you did the sticks laying on the ground. No. Okay. Are you aware that there was a blood spatter expert hired in this case just this year to take a look at that tree? So crimes happened 2017. You hire a blood spatter expert 2024, the year that you're going to trial. Hmm. I'm aware that an expert was contacted, but that's the extent of my information. Were blood spatter patterns available to you in the course of your line of employment back in 2017? I believe so, yes. Okay. Did you employ one or recommend to anyone that one be employed in this case? To meet the definition of the Indiana State Police's lab manual for an expert on that matter, no. To have someone trained at the scene to examine it, I would say yes, Sergeant Page has been trained, but he's not a qualified expert as to the lab manual's definition of an expert. Okay. So after you cleared the scene, did you employ a blood spatter expert to assist you in this case? Mr. Luttrell says, asked and answered. Sustained. It has not been asked and answered, but I guess the jury can assume other than Sergeant Page, who is not a lab manual's definition of an expert in blood spatter, was part of the investigation. That doesn't mean diddly squat, but okay. And she sustained it, of course. It is possible that a blood spatter expert could have assisted in helping determining the chronology of events uh, that occurred out there in terms of when the girls were disrobed and clothed again. I'm not aware of a technique of blood spatter that would have given that information. Would it be helpful to know if somebody has blood on them and they're clothed, how that blood might move on their body because they're clothed? Yes. Okay, well, now we're getting somewhere with you admitting something. Okay, would that be something a blood spatter expert might be able to help with? They may. We talked a little bit earlier yesterday, a little bit about scavengers. You acknowledged there was not much disturbance, if any, with regard to those two girls' bodies out there in terms of outside factors having influenced them before you guys got there. I'm not aware of any outside factors influencing the bodies, meaning they probably weren't there all night, if I were to take a guess. Are those things that you're concerned about from time to time when you have outdoor crime scenes that other animals and insects and things can impact those scenes? I don't know that I'm worried about it. I mean, it's part of the crime scene and I would deal with it as it came. Fair enough. It's a poorly worded question. Are those things that you take into consideration? I would take them into consideration. And they would be helpful in determining timing in a way that chronology, the way things happen at the scene, right? They can be useful in giving a varied range of time. In terms of time, do you acknowledge that you were not able to determine the time that those girls were deceased based on the work that you did in this case? I can't give you a precise time of death, and I think time of death is a very imprecise science. And so, what you're telling me, or would you agree with me? I would say that it happened sometime between they were last seen on the 13th and when they were found on the 14th, right? Objection to the form of the question. Would you agree with me? To the form of the question. I'll rephrase it. Rephrase it. Do you agree with me that it happened? You said it again. That it happened sometime between those times. Objection to the word agree being used in the question. The attorney's opinion is not relevant to this jury. It's improper to share that with them. Okay, sustained on that, rephrase it. Did it happen sometime between those two time periods? Which time periods? Oh my God. Are you following along, witness? The time that they were last seen on February 13th and the time that they were found on February 14th. I would say yes. If they were seen on the 13th alive and found dead on the 14th, then their death occurred sometime in between the last time they were seen alive and the time that they were found deceased. Okay. Thank you for that. You talked about water levels a little bit. Did you go out into the creek or ask anyone else to go into the creek to determine what the water levels were that day? Yes. I spoke with members of the dive team, asked them to determine, to my knowledge, I don't know that they took an actual ruler out there, but the bottom of the creek is not a flat plain. It is undulating, I would say, and it varied. As I asked the officers to move out from areas of an inch or two of water up or to about 2.5, maybe 3 feet in some areas from where there was some undulations that went much deeper, up to about 3 feet point. Thank you. Are you finished? Yeah. The area closer to the north shoreline appeared to be deeper. Is that fair? There were areas which were deeper, but I would say again that the undulations of the entire area move and change on a daily basis with the movement of rock, silt, and sediment in the water. So if we went back out there today, it may be a completely different scene. Even days later, it may be completely different in that creek. It's a living, breathing creek. We're talking about on February 14th, 2017. I mean, did the area closer to the North Shore appear to be deeper than it did on the other side? In some areas, yes. Were you able to discover any location on that North Shore where you would include or where you could conclude that one or more individuals traveled up that shore? Conclusively, no. You're a hunter, you said? Yes, sir. And you spent some time out in the woods from time to time. More open field. A bird hunter? Yes, sir. All right. Is there anything unusual about finding a spent or unspent round in a woodlot in Indiana? From a hunting cartridge capability in that area, I would find it more odd to find a 40 caliber round. I would find it much more likely to find a shotgun round of a 12 gauge, a 20 gauge, a 410 gauge, or some round of ammunition approved for hunting of wild game as a handgun round. Was there anything unusual about finding a spent or unspent round in a woodlot in Indiana? I wouldn't find it odd to find a round anywhere in the state of Indiana. I guess they're big gun nuts, which, no opinion either way. I'm just saying. I guess that's a statement on the state of Indiana. There's a lot of shooting going on, apparently. And it's not uncommon for bullets, unspent rounds, cartridges, whatever, to be on the ground. So for them to just see that and automatically equate it to Richard Allen is kind of odd. Okay, thank you. Now, in this particular, well, let me ask you this. Is it unusual for people to take handguns out into the woods and fire them? What other people do, it would be unusual for me to do that on someone else's property. You ever lived out in the country? Yes, sir. Okay, people in the country have guns. Some do. Okay, and do those people shoot those guns from time to time? They do occasionally. And are wooded areas a place where people might shoot those guns? They may. I'm kind of jealous, to be honest, because I live in suburbs of Chicago basically my whole life, and our property is tiny. You can't just go out onto your property and just go shooting and practicing your firing capability. I would love to do that, but sorry, guess not in not in the city of Chicago. Too many people. Anyways, kind of jealous. All right, so he says they may. Would you be surprised if somebody was out in this wooded area along this creek at some point in time prior to those girls' death firing a gun? I would not be surprised. He would not be surprised if someone was out there prior to this day shooting a gun. You have a Sig Sauer? I do not. Okay. Was that what was issued to you back in 2017? That's correct. There's been many references here to different models. P227. Do you remember that? I was issued P227. Yes, sir. And then a 239 or a 226, did you say? No, I've never had a 227, right? A 227, which is a 45 caliber. Okay. And then you said P365, which is a 9 millimeter. That's correct. And then there are other Sig Sauer then insert the numbers for other types of Sig Sauer handguns, right? I'm not sure about the P designation, and I'm not familiar with the other designations for other models of there are P365s with different words after them that are also 9 millimeters, but I'm not aware of any other. I don't know Sig Sauer's nomenclature well enough to give an opinion. Okay, well, let's stick to the 227 and the 365. Those were the two models that you mentioned, right? That's correct. And are those guns very similar in terms of their platform, if you will, as how they're designed? Not at all. Okay, they're totally different? Yes, very different. Okay. Do you know anything about what the inside of those guns looks like? What the tools are inside of those guns? Beyond basic operation and basic system of the firearm to include my ability to clean my firearms and utilize my firearms? No. But how those tools are manufactured that are placed in those guns, you don't know anything about that? I'm not, no. So you would defer to somebody who is an expert in that. I would defer to an expert on firearms. I was looking at the top photo. May I approach, Your Honor? You may. The photo, which is states 78. Have you seen this? Yes, sir. Have you seen this photo before? I'm going to try to, we're not publishing here because I just put it right here so the jurors can look at it. Is that okay? Yes, sir. This is a photo of the north side of the creek. Is that correct? It's taken from the north side. Okay. And if there's in the left side here, just close to the creek line or the shoreline, I should say, there are a couple of places where there's some debris. You see that? One up on the kind of the top center, and then the other one down here at the bottom center, if you will. Yes, I see it. Okay. And are those two of the locations where some of these items that we've talked about today were collected? They are. Okay. This creek is flowing downstream from the top left to the bottom right of the photo, right? That's correct. I would call it east to west direction. Okay. Generally speaking. So one could conclude that those items that were stuck on those parts of debris, those items that were stuck on the debris could have come from upstream. It's possible. And you don't know where those items were discarded originally before they met their final resting location on those pieces of debris, right? I don't know where or how they were discarded. Now, in terms of the scope of your search, I'm not going to pull the TV over just in the interest of time. Do you acknowledge where 300 North is, County Road 300 North? Yes. You know where it is relative to the crime scene? It's to the north. Yeah, the road north of the cemetery? That runs along the north edge of the cemetery, yes. Okay. That's kind of east-west of a road. Is that fair? I would say yes, that's generally speaking. At any point in time in this case, were you ever asked to inspect any areas north of 300 County Road 300 North? To my knowledge, no. Okay, do you know where the Mears connector is? I'm sorry, the mirror? Do you know where the Mears connector is? I'm not familiar with that term. Okay, I'm going to help you out. Do you understand that there was a trailhead at the time back in 2017 up on 300 North that essentially cut into the Monon High Bridge Trail somewhere in the middle? I'm not aware of the full extent of the trail system. Okay. Were you ever asked or did you ever conduct any kind of search for clothing, discarded items of clothing, or anything like that anywhere near the Hoosier Heartland north of 300? I did not. Okay. You know where the CPS building was located at the time? No. Okay. Not specifically. All right. What about the area? One second, Your Honor. Let me hand you what's been marked as, may I approach, Your Honor? You may. States Exhibit 5. I'd like to just throw this up, but I don't want to manipulate the TV, and the jury already has it. So, do you generally recognize this as being the Deer Creek that runs through the center of States 5? Correct. Then the high bridge is visible in the photograph. Okay. Can I turn this? Yes. Says the witness. Just so the jury can see it. Thank you. And with regard to States 5, I was asking you about 300 North, which is right here. That's correct? Okay. And I asked you if you had searched anywhere north of 300 North, and your answer is simply no, right? No. Okay. At any point in time during this investigation, it's not a trick question, did you ever go out and search a cornfield around this part? I did search areas north of Carroll County Road North. Yes. As part of this investigation? Yes. The witness says that he did search areas north of Carroll County Road 300. Yes. Even though he just said no when first asked if he did any searching north of 300 North, and now he's saying yes. As part of this investigation? Yes. When did that occur? Within the weeks afterwards, places, locations in Monticello and White County, and okay, all right, I'm talking about immediately north of 300. Immediately north within this picture, there's nothing in this picture that I recall ever being asked to search north of the country road. I think that is supposed to be county road. Okay, and the Andersons is located over here in the corner. It's the top left corner. Is that right? The grain elevator? Yeah, grain elevator. I don't remember the name. Okay. And you were never asked to search anywhere over there? I was not. No. Okay. Let me direct your attention to this farm here, this farmhouse that's just north of 300 North. Do you see that? I do see an area. And do you see where the High Bridge Trail runs to the northwest and kind of almost meets that particular area across the street from the farmhouse? It appears to. Have you ever or are you familiar with the fact that there was what I referred to as the Mears connector earlier? There's a little trail that connected the main trail there, or not? I wasn't aware of that, no. So that probably answers my questions. You never searched any of the area along that part of the trail between 300 North and the trail either. No, sir. Like I said, they didn't investigate from they only investigated the immediate crime scene, and they didn't look at granted it's a large property and it's going to take some resources to do your CSI investigation, but if you want to do it properly, that's what you're supposed to do, and you should have retraced their steps and looked in all those areas and investigated all those areas. But as we know, he didn't even know that that Mears connector existed, so how could he search it? For discarded items and clothing or anything like that. No, sir. Okay. Item 148. This is what we, the defense, have referred to as the magic bullet, right? Objection, Your Honor. It's an inappropriate reference and question. Mr. Rosie says I'm asking if he acknowledges that we refer to it as that. Court says it's a little argumentative. Mr. Luttrell says it's irrelevant if he has anyway, but it's an improper question. Court says it's improper. Rephrase your question. Have you heard that phrase in the course of this investigation? Objection, Your Honor. It's irrelevant. How is this relevant, Mr. Rosie? I'm using it to identify the exhibit instead of talking about then use the identity exhibit as an item number. Then use the identity that has been accepted and relayed to this jury as 148. Your characterization is improper. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Really? 148. Right. You can't see it from there? Yeah, that is State's Exhibit 148, a Smith& Wesson 40 caliber round, right? Yes, that is the caliber, yes. I saw maybe 6 or 7 photos of that round that were taken at the crime scene. Have you seen more than that? I have not. Okay. Have you looked for more? I have not. Okay. Did anybody ask you, like, hey, are there any more than 5 or 6 rounds, 6, 7 rounds of this photograph of this round? There's only 5 or 6 photographs of that particular round, the cartridge. They're saying the thing that connects Richard Allen to the crime scene, they only had 5 or 6 photos. Not to I don't recall being asked that, no. Do you acknowledge that there were no photographs of that unspent round that were taken of the ground where it sat after it was removed? Objection, asked and answered, sustained. May we approach? Sure. We have a brief little sidebar here. I think the question was, Mr. Rosie says, I think the question was whether or not there were any photographs of the ground where it was removed. That's the first time I've asked that. Mr. Luttrell says, then I misunderstood the question. Court says, oh, okay, all right. Mr. Luttrell says, I apologize. The court says, withdraw the objection. He says something that we don't get to know. The court says, okay, and sidebar concluded. Mr. Rosie says, thank you. Do you acknowledge that there were no photographs of the ground where that unspent round was removed after it was removed? I believe other photographs were taken at the crime scene which would have depicted the ground after it was removed. Okay, fair enough, but highlighting that particular area so you could see how that ground was laying or how that round was laying on the ground after it was removed. I'm not aware of any photographs specifically detailing the close-up areas of where the bullet was removed after it was removed. And do you acknowledge that there are no photographs of that round, that unspent round, in its true state, the entirety of it, after it was removed? I did not take any, no. So he acknowledges they didn't. And do you agree with me that it would be helpful in an investigation like this to see a picture of that round after it was removed from the ground? Objection to the form of the question, it's improper, and asks if he agrees with the lawyer. Form of the question, sustained. Sorry. She's got to sustain. She wants to sustain everything for the state. It's important in these investigations to document, isn't it? It can be, yes. The most important thing that you're doing out there is preserving information and items, correct? I would say yes. And I think I heard Officer Page at one point saying you can never take too many photographs. Have you heard that in the context of one of these investigations? I think the conversation I've had with people is film is free. Say that again? Film is free, doesn't cost. Okay, so the logical extension of that is that you can take a lot of photographs. You can. And this particular item was a very significant find at that crime scene, wasn't it? It potentially was. And would you agree with me that you did a poor job of documenting that particular item as it relates to collecting it as evidence? Objection, his opinion is not relevant. It's not part of argument. It's not part of question and answer. I'd object to the form of the question. Mr. Brosey says it's his own work product, Your Honor. It's the form of the question, says the judge. Mr. Luttrell says, I'd object to asking if he agrees with Mr. Rosie. Sustained. My God. Do you wish you would have taken more pictures of that round? Not particularly. No. Okay. Strike that. Is it unprofessional to pick that round up, hold it, and take a photograph while it's being collected? Anything unprofessional about that? I would say having an individual in the photograph would be considered potentially unprofessional. Placing it into a clean area and an unobstructed area which was not present at the scene would be a more proper way to document that photograph. Well, that wasn't done in this case, was it? It was not. All you had to do was take it back to your lab, put it on a table, and take a photograph of it. It's not that difficult. It wasn't done. States Exhibit 82, a picture of a sock, right? That's correct. Somebody's holding the sock, right? They are. Picked it up with their hand. They did. So you're saying you can't pick up the casing, the cartridge, this really important piece of evidence, and let us see what it looks like out of the ground, but yet you can pick up a sock and take a picture of a hand holding a sock. Make that make sense. Okay. So picked it up with their hand. They did. And took a picture of it. They did. No face in the picture, right? There is not. Is that unprofessional? It wouldn't be my preferred method. I wouldn't call it unprofessional, but I wouldn't call it the preferred method. Mr. Rosie says, 1 second, Your Honor. You did mention at one point that you had inspected Libby's, I think you said wrist areas for defensive wounds. Do you generally remember that testimony? I think it was yesterday. Generally, yes. Okay. Did you discover any type of defensive wounds on her body? I'm sorry. I'm sorry? Did you discover any type of defensive wounds on her body? I did not. Pass the witness. So we're going to go into redirect with Mr. Luttrell. How many items of ammunition were collected in your investigation at Ground Zero? 1. How many items of ammunition were found anywhere at that crime scene on the 14th? 1. Of all the evidence that you collected and packaged in this investigation on the 14th and the 15th, how many items of ammunition did you place into a package under this case number? 1 item. When you were packaging the evidence in this case, did you have evidence from other investigations, other cases positioned, located within the area you were packaging? No. Did you package each item individually, one at a time? I did. Mr. Rosie asked you the most important thing is to do all that you can to preserve the evidence, something like that. Regardless of what he said, I'm going to ask you, is that the most important thing? I would say the documentation of the scene and preservation of the items at the scene are the two most important things. And after photographing the cartridge in the ground, did you place it in its individual package to preserve any evidence that might be on it? That's correct. Holding it in your hand for 1 second to take a picture isn't going to, if you're gloved, it's not going to do anything if you're already picking it up with your fingertips. Whatever. Is a .45 caliber distinct from a .40 caliber? By size and weight, yes. Is there any way that you would confuse one for the other? I don't believe I would, no. Were you surprised? Let me ask this differently. If the girls were overnight in the condition that you found them, would you be surprised the next afternoon when you arrived at the scene not to find any evidence of critter activity or scavenger activity on the bodies of the girls? I would not be. Would it be your expectation not to find them in that fashion after being overnight in the condition in which you found them? What? I would expect to find them in a very similar condition left overnight as I found them. No further questions. Mr. Rosie has some recross here. You're talking about the condition of the bodies, right? Yes. But expect that they might be exposed to some predators or scavengers. That wouldn't be unusual, would it? It wouldn't necessarily be unusual, but I would also say at the time of year, insect activity is very much non existent in northern Indiana, and insect activity is one of the things that often brings other animals, small and large, to the bodies. And the fact that there's no insect activity at that time of year, I think, lends itself to the fact that there were no animal activities on the body. Animal activity on the body. Is that true? That the bugs are what bring the rest of the wildlife? I I don't I don't know if that's true. Ever seen turkey buzzards in Indiana? Yes. Ever seen them on the highway on roadkill? I have. Pretty common around these parts, isn't it? It's very common, yes, I would say. They can be pretty quick at getting at those things, can't they? Sometimes. Now, you said you collected only one round in this case, right? That's correct. You could have spent some extra time or given some extra attention because it was the only one that you collected, wasn't it? I could have, he admits. If you had to do it over again, would you have taken more photos of the round? I would not. I'm going to double down and say no. I did everything perfectly. I would not, based on the fact that it did identify, to my knowledge, a firearm that was used with it. So, protecting it and preserving it, I feel, is the right thing to do, and taking no attempt to do anything else that I might do to damage or transform, and taking away or taking every attempt to preserve that evidence. Really. You're picking it up anyways. You could just or have someone else take a photo of it while it's in your hand, your little, your gloved hand that you're picking it up. You could still take a photo of it that way. I don't understand why this is so hard for them. But, anyways, if you had to do it all over again, would you have taken more photos of the area? Close up photos of the area on the ground where the round had laid before you picked it up. I mean, I think I took 5 or 6 photographs of one item. Close ups? There were only 2 or 3 that were close ups. Did you ever take a close-up photograph of that round? A close-up where you got down, or did you ever see a photograph of that round when it was under those leaves that were moved before it was photographed? Yeah, I believe there was one photograph where it was visible before we found it. Before you found it? Yes. All right. Okay, I have nothing further. Does anybody on the jury have any questions for Mr. Olehy? And here we go. We got jury questions. So let's buckle up. All right. So now the jury's not listening or can't hear this. The court says, we're going to break after this. Mr. Rosie says, okay, we're going to break after this. She repeats herself. Mr. Luttrell says, may I grab my notepad? The court says, sure. Did the undergrowth appear to be disrupted under Abby to indicate that she was dressed as she laid there? Mr. Rosie says, I'm okay with that. The court says, when the evidence is being tested at the lab, how is that logged and resealed in the same bag? I'm okay with that. Jim? I think he's answered. Is it common practice to change gloves at any point during evidence collection? Mr. Rosie says, I'm okay with that. The court says, was the bullet collected in an envelope or a pillbox? Mr. Rosie says, yeah, it's been answered, but I'm okay with that. He said pillbox. Mrs. Auger said, he said pillbox. The court says, well, I think sometimes people get it. I think, isn't it in an envelope now? Because it was collected in a. Okay, they heard it, but they're not listening. Okay. What identifies which collected items were reopened or seal broken by the lab personnel? Is there initials on that item? Mr. Rosie says, I'm okay with that. The court says, okay, so we'll go through all those questions and then we'll take a break. These are good questions for the jury because they need to know this going into deliberations on how to determine, if they have questions about who sealed it and unsealed it and whatnot, they can go back and or it's good that they're getting clarification now instead of having to go back later and asking later. All right, so the juror questions of Olehy asked by the court. All right, Mr. Olehy, did the undergrowth appear to be disrupted under Abby to indicate that she was dressed as she laid there? I'm sorry, can you read that again, please? Yes, sir. Did the undergrowth appear to be disrupted under Abby to indicate that she was dressed as she laid there? I don't recall any area under her directly that was disturbed beyond just small movement or movement of the body during the examination of the scene. Mr. Trell, any follow-up? I have none. Mr. Rosie? No, ma'am. When the evidence is being tested at the lab, how is it that logged and resealed in the same bag? So, an analyst, and may I illustrate? Certainly. So to use item 151 as an example, the top portion is sealed with my initials and my seal. These are my initials. This is my identifying officer number and my seals over the complete area of the opening of the flap. The bottom is also sealed by me, even though it's factory sealed. The side is actually opened with a sharp-edged instrument like an X-Acto knife or a small pair of very sharp scissors, and it's opened actually along the side and the item is removed. And then once it's removed, it's resealed by the evidence person dealing with it, whether it be a chemist, an analyst, whoever it is in the lab. And then they place it back in and reseal it in the exact same container. As well, it does have the identifying number on it for the individual item that the laboratory would use to track it. And then also the square here and the handwriting here indicates that it was removed by the same initials, which is SB and SB up here, indicating the lab evidence number and the lab item number. So this box is affixed and added on each item examined by an analyst. Any follow-up by Mr. Luttrell? And he does. Do you recognize the initials SB relating to the laboratory system at the Indianapolis, Indiana State Police? Based on this case, I would assume that is the initials of Stacy Bozanovsky. And who is she? She is a DNA analyst and lab analyst for the Indiana State Police Laboratory at the Indiana State Police Lab in Indianapolis. And in your experience, what is the situation if you deliver a package not fully sealed to the Indiana State Police Laboratory? It would be rejected by the lab for acceptance. Thank you. No further questions. Court says, Mr. Rosie, no questions. Next question. It's read by the court. Is it common practice to change gloves at any point during evidence collection? For example, different gloves for evidence collection on each item. Yes, absolutely. I go through boxes of gloves at a crime scene. I think I described yesterday wearing often two pairs of gloves for the ease of change. The gloves underneath protect my hands, and most often my practice was to wear two pairs of gloves so I could more quickly change them and still put a pair of gloves on without the sweaty hands or wet hands or anything like that. Any follow-up? No, Your Honor. Mr. Rosie? No. Was the bullet collected in an envelope or a pillbox? It was collected at the scene in an envelope, and in order to preserve its integrity and not touch, damage, or destruct it in any way, it was never removed from its initial packaging. That was packaged at the scene directly by me at the scene. He said pillbox, and now he's saying an envelope. Mr. Luttrell, the court says, Mr. Luttrell, no questions. Mr. Rosie, no questions. What identifies which collected items were reopened or your seal broken by the lab personnel? Are there initials on the seal? As I previously stated, yes, it's the item. The item is opened by a lab analyst with their individual seal and resealed by them. They'll have their specific markings or initials. And in this case, in item 151, the item is opened by Stacy Bozanovich, resealed with packaging tape, and then resealed and signed on both sides to indicate that she was the one who opened and resealed the item. Mr. Luttrell, I have no further questions. Mr. Rosie, you'd agree with me that item 148, for example, would be treated similar to 151 in terms of your testimony just a second ago. I would say yes. To which I would object to the form of the question, says Mr. Luttrell. Would you agree with me? And the court says, form of the question. Would item 148 be treated the same as item 151 in terms of your testimony just now? It would. And would there also be, with item 148 specifically, the bullet, the round, would there also be a log sheet that chronicles the travels of that amount from the time it was collected by you to the time that it landed here in this courtroom? There would be a chain of custody maintained on it from the time that I collected it up until this date. You ever see that chain of custody log in this case with that item 148? I have not, and it would not be uncommon for me not to review or see the chain of custody logs after an item leaves me. Okay, I don't have any further questions. The court says, all right, thank you, Mr. Olehy. You may step down. Thank you, Your Honor, he says. She says, yeah, you can just put that back in the box. Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. Again, ladies and gentlemen, while you're outside the courtroom, please keep your minds open. Please don't form any final opinions, conclusions about anything. You may discuss the evidence that you've heard so far, but please only that is if all 16 of you are present in the jury room at the same time. And then please don't deliberate. Gentlemen, all rise. Jury's out of the room. The court says, all right, let's take 15 minutes. And they go off the record at 10:51 a.m. So we will continue there. Who's next? I forget. Oh, Brian Bunner. Lieutenant Brian Bunner is next. We'll get to him in the next episode. So make sure you are subscribed and hit the like button. Let me know what you think so far of this trial, this sham of a trial where they are framing an innocent man. Let me know what you think, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching. Take care. Bye now.